Now, more than 250,000 homes now own one of these video games. Children and adults are apparently spending hours and hours in front of the television, not watching Neighbours, but killing drug dealers, scoring touchdowns, and even doing a bit of plumbing. But is it good for you? Now, a new survey of school children due for publication this summer claims that computer games could make children social outcasts. And with me now are psychologist and mum, that's Sue Stirling. Mark Smith is here, who's the editor of a video game magazine. And Radio 1 DJ Mark Goodier, a confirmed video games fanatic. So very nice to see you all. Now, Sue, I just want to ask you first of all about this report. Do you go along with it?
Well, I think we need to look at what the conclusions are. I don't think anyone's advocating that the newspapers should be full of second-hand computer games. But it was an average of 65% of leisure time for children between 12 and 16 was being spent in front of a computer. Now, if you look at that in terms of average, that means that some will not be spending terribly long at all, but other ones must be spending up to almost all the time. And it's a very, very powerful toy, pleasure, call it what you like.
But what are you worried about most of all? I mean, surely some people say, well, it's fun, it's interesting, it helps coordination.
Well, it does all those things. I think one of the problems is that play isn't just about play, we learn through play. And one of the issues I think that's been raised is if children are spending such amount of time with computers, then is that the main emotional relationship they're having? What about the social aspect? What about all the other activities that are also important for their development?
So is it that kind of solitary thing that you're worried about, the fact that they're sitting on their own most of the time just with this computer?
Yes, very much. And I guess it's a case of just, we don't know. It is very powerful. Yes, we've had Meccano in the past. Yes, we've had books in the past. But I think anyone who's sat in front of a screen knows that we're talking about something that companies spend a lot of money, visuals, sound. It's very enticing.
Now, Mark is sitting there, obviously well known for spinning the discs, but I believe that you're a Nintendo freak.
I love it. And the funny thing about it was, I thought I was computer illiterate. I could never play computer games. I thought until my radio producer brought them back from America. And I at first thought, nah, silly, for kids. And I looked at it and I started to play it and I was there. It really is very exciting.
So how bad did this obsession with this game get?
Well, I would hesitate to describe it as an obsession because it is really very good fun, but then you do go through a phase where you can't put it down because it teaches you and it challenges you, and the object is to defeat the machine. I think that children can play it very much quicker. They do seem to be very much quicker at getting through the games, so perhaps if I spend half an hour to finish a game, an 11-year-old kid yesterday told me he spent 10 minutes.
So what was the longest period of time you spent on a game?
Well, I did have a rather bad weekend once when my brother-in-law came down from Glasgow and we played 8 hours a day over 3 days.
And your wife must have been going mental at this stage.
She ceremoniously removed the machine from the television and dumped it in the spare room in the house.
I am not surprised. I'm not surprised. What do you think, though, about this report?
Well, I think that, I mean, it's not for me to say because I'm not a parent, but what I do...
What you do, Guy? I mean, in a way, kids look to you, though,
sure,
don't they?
What I think is that you have to exercise, like with anything, like you wouldn't allow children to watch TV all the time. For watching Neighbours is an addiction for some people, and you have to, obviously say, well, you can't watch that all the time. And I think that something in moderation, I think, is reasonable. Now,
the other Mark that's with us today, all these Marks around the studio, you run this Nintendo Club, which is like a counselling line for people who want to ring in. But in America, I understand that it's more like a clinic where they actually help wean you off it. That's not in your case, though, is it?
Oh, not at all, no. In England, we run the helpline, which is based in Fareham. And it's there simply to help people with game problems. People getting through a game, stuck on World 6 or 7. And 99.9% are from genuine gameplay, people just enjoying our games.
So why is it in America, then, that the equivalent, that the clubs there have actually had to try and counsel to get people off it?
That's actually a bit of a myth to me because I've never heard of that before.
It does exist, though, doesn't it, Mark?
Apparently it does exist, but I mean, I suppose that you can, get trapped into lots of different things, and I think that the adults perhaps are more able to get switched off by... The machines themselves, the Nintendo, do have a sort of a switch-off factor. They don't always keep you playing all night and day.
So at the end of it all, then, how much can we call it an addiction, Sue?
Well, I think if you look at addiction as a problem when it interferes with other aspects of your life, when it's meaning that you're becoming very sort of focused, it's your 8 hours a day, if you like. I think you've got to appreciate, not everybody who's got a Nintendo is going to have that problem, but as parents, I think we need to appreciate that the risks are there and
I
not be naive.
When you hear a figure like 65%, Mark, of leisure time, children spend, you know, with computers. That is a lot of their leisure time,
That would be an
isn't it?
extreme, but that would be an extreme of people too. I don't actually know. As I say, on the helpline, it is about 99.9% of people are genuine game players.
I mean, I'd have to come in there and say that that was the finding out of a survey of 800 school children. And so that isn't the extreme. You'd have to say the extreme must have been near the 95%. Yes, there'll be other children who it won't take up terribly much of the time, but there is a population out there.
Well, it's the same thing though with things like soap operas. I mean, people spend over 65% of their time watching TV and reading books, and that's very insular. And a child playing the Nintendo, which is an item, let's face it, he wants friends to come round and see it and play it. 65% would be a lot, but on a normal healthy child, you know, would be playing it for a healthy amount of time and be involved with other people playing it. It's not such a bad thing.
Actually, we've got some people in the audience. Now, we've got a couple of families here. We have the Freeman family, and Harvey is sitting up in the back row there, and with him is his wife, Linda, and we've got Adam in the front. So, as a dad, Harvey, are you ever accused of being a bad influence here?
No, I don't think I've ever been accused of being a bad influence. I think I've been complimented on being a kind father by taking part with my son and enjoying every minute of it. I think the fact that people are saying it's an addiction is a very, very harsh word to put to really a child's game, although there are a lot of adults that play it.
All right, how many hours at a time then would you play?
I would possibly find maybe an hour in an evening, on a good evening, but it all depends. Weekends sometimes more.
And what about Adam in the front? I hear you're a whiz on the computer. How many hours would you spend at it?
About 2.5 hours like each day.
At a time. And you write all your own programs and things too, don't you? So what do you think then of the accusation that children or young people like yourself, that you do just spend too long?
Not really sure.
I mean, do you feel that maybe you ought to be out kicking a ball around or doing some outdoor sports or something like that instead of stuck with a computer?
Well, on a sunny day, I'd go out and play football, but if it's pouring with rain outside, I'd just come in and play on the Nintendo.
See, the other thing, Harvey, that people talk about is this solitary thing. I mean, do you think, for example, that Adam spends enough time with other people?
Yes, I think he spends a lot of time. He has a lot of friends, and where it's possibly a solitary thing, there may be an occasion where his friends are coming over and we might turn around and say, look, Adam, don't use the computer today, your friends are coming over. They come over and revolt against it because he hasn't got the computer out. So it really goes against him, actually. And then he comes back and says, can I turn it on? And say, well, OK, if it keeps your friends happy.
Actually, Linda's being very quiet there, your wife. Do you ever play it at all, Linda?
No.
Do you ever feel like tossing the whole thing out?
I think it's great.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, we'll have to get you on it then if you think it's so good. Now, let me come to Jeanette Summers, because, Jeanette, I don't think that you're just quite too sure whether you agree with it all or not.
Well, I certainly feel that as a parent you've got to sort of restrict it a bit, because I think it is a sort of real danger that it does become an addiction. And it frightens me to think that they might be escaping from something else and going into a little sort of closed-in world. That I don't like that particularly, no.
Is that the thing that worries you most?
I think so, yeah, and also the fact that it might restrict their other activities, yeah.
Of course, in the end, it all boils back to the parent, doesn't it? It all comes back, you know, maybe should the parents control it more? So what do you think in that sphere?
Yes, and let's be quite realistic. I mean, what parent hasn't been eternally grateful for something that keeps the children occupied? I mean, that's part and parcel of life. And the question is about, we don't know. I mean, this survey is one of the first surveys that's been done, and I think caution. I mean, I wouldn't like to be coming across and saying this is a terrible thing, you know, we should get rid of it. But I think we do actually have to ask some questions.
Yes, you're a bit of a dilemma, because apart from your profession, you've got a son as well who's actually on the computer in the studio.
Yes,
so
yes.
You must find the balance very, very tight.
Oh yes, and I would challenge anyone who said that children don't get hooked on games, very, very much. And one of the questions is, does it dominate that child's life?
Well, Mark is dealing with young people all the time. Do you get much reaction from the youngsters about it?
They love playing it, and I do think that some people probably play too much, but I do think that you eventually grow out of it. I mean, I got to the end of Super Mario Land after 4 months of trying.
4 months of it?
Some pop stars who I talked to, Vince Clarke of Depeche Mode of Erasure now, said 6 months it took him. But I think the kids can do it in a week, you know. So once you've completed it, once you've finished the challenge, then you can put it down. I'm
surprised they got you to do any work at Radio 1 at all during that period. I just want to go over and see how our young people over here are actually getting on. And I've got Tom here, and then I've got Ewan. And you're actually having a bit of a problem, Tom, at the beginning. What was wrong?
I can't start it.
You can't start it. That's a bit of a problem, isn't it? So you haven't been able to play it at all? Well, now, if you were at home, how many hours would you play at a time?
Don't know.
You don't know, really, not too much. And what about you, Ewan?
About 3 a day.
3 a day? Well, you obviously got your machine started all right, didn't you? Mm-hmm. And what do you think about these reports and things that say that boys your age shouldn't really be on the computer so much?
Well, I think they're useless and they're not really anything to do with it.
You don't think they know anything, eh?
Because they don't know anything.
They don't know anything, no. So you just think you're going to continue on, are you, and play those 3 hours a day? But if it's a sunny day, you would leave it alone and go out, wouldn't you?
I might.
You might, but you're not too sure, eh?
Because
Well, listen, I hope you eventually manage to get this machine. Oh, you started now, are you?
No.
No, still not going. Oh, I don't know. You can't get the staff these days to keep the technical equipment right. Anyway, I'd like to thank everybody. Sue Stirling, Mark Goodier, Mark Smith, and of course our young people in the studio who took part, and indeed our audience. Thank you very much.